Sometimes a single act of kindness can change everything. Tonight, a 14-year-old boy spends his last $15 to save a life, and the ripple effect transforms his family, his city, and even strangers who once seemed unreachable. This is the story of courage, redemption, and second chances. Kevin Washington, just 14, wiped the sweat from his brow as he held the crumpled $15 in his hand. The only money he had earned after a long, punishing day washing cars under the relentless Detroit sun. Every coin, every crumpled bill was meant for something crucial. The asthma medicine his 8-year-old sister Destiny desperately needed to breathe. He could already picture her tiny chest rising and falling with difficulty, her small hands clutching at her throat, and he felt the familiar pang of responsibility. Growing up in one of Detroit's toughest neighborhoods, Kevin had learned early that life often demanded hard choices, and that family came first. His mother, Tracy Washington, worked 3 jobs as a nurse, and her constant mantra echoed in his head. When someone needs help, you help them, no matter who they are. Yet that lesson collided violently with reality as Kevin knelt next to a man sprawled on the cold asphalt of the pharmacy parking lot. The man was enormous, dressed in leather and adorned with tattoos that told stories Kevin could only guess at. His lips had turned blue, his face a sickly shade of purple, and every shallow breath he drew was an urgent reminder of the life slipping away before Kevin's eyes. A Hell's Angel, his vest marking him as part of a notorious biker gang, was having a heart attack right there in front of him. Kevin knew what it meant. He had seen his grandfather's struggle with his own heart, the helplessness, the panic that clawed at his chest as he tried to help someone he loved. "Hey, kid, get out of the way before I call the police," shouted the pharmacy manager, pointing aggressively at Kevin as if the boy himself had caused this man's suffering. A few passers-by muttered their own judgments, and one white customer sneered as he left the store with a bag in hand. "These guys are criminals. Let the police deal with it," he said, as though life and death could wait for bureaucracy. A middle-aged woman stopped, shaking her head with disapproval. "What kind of example are you setting, boy? Didn't your parents teach you any better?" Kevin's chest burned with anger, the weight of every disparaging word pressing down on him, yet he forced himself to focus. Destiny needed medicine, yes, but this man needed help now. The biker's eyelids fluttered weakly. My medicine, in my pocket," he rasped. Kevin quickly searched the jacket's many pockets and found a small bottle of nitroglycerin, empty. Panic rose in his chest, but he didn't let it show. He needed aspirin, and he needed it fast. The pharmacy manager, arms crossed and eyes cold, refused to help. "I don't sell anything to minors," he said, his voice harsh, leaving no room for negotiation. Kevin's heart raced. He looked at the $15 in his hand, money meant for Destiny's survival, and then at the man whose life depended on a single decision. Without hesitation, Kevin ran into the store, the metal door clanging behind him, and grabbed a box of aspirin and a bottle of water. He slammed the crumpled bills on the counter. "This is for a medical emergency," he said firmly. "Will you sell it to me or not?" The manager rolled his eyes, muttering as he took the money without even offering change. Kevin didn't wait. He ran back to the parking lot, heart hammering, and knelt again beside the man. Breaking the aspirin into 2 halves, he forced them into the biker's mouth. "Chew, it'll help," he said, holding the man's head steady. For 10 minutes, Kevin stayed there, murmuring words of encouragement, refusing to be distracted by the judgmental stares and the cell phone cameras of passers-by, likely waiting for the worst to capture it. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics were shocked. "Did you give him aspirin?" one asked. Kevin nodded. "Yes, sir. I saved him." The paramedic's face softened with respect. "Kid, you saved this man's life!" A few more minutes and it would have been too late. As the stretcher carried the biker away, he gripped Kevin's hand tightly. "What's your name, kid?" he asked, coughing. "Kevin Washington," the boy replied. The man, eyes watery, whispered, "Kevin, you saved me. I won't forget." And just like that, the life-or-death moment passed, leaving Kevin alone in the parking lot with no money, no medicine for Destiny, and a gnawing mix of pride and dread. He walked through the dark streets toward home, hands empty in his pockets, each step echoing with the knowledge that Destiny's health was in danger. 3 blocks from the apartment, the sound of wheezing reached him. Destiny was having an asthma attack. He ran up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, and found his mother holding her daughter, desperate to calm her as each breath came in shallow gasps. "Where's the medicine, Kevin?" Tracy's exhausted eyes pleaded. Kevin hung his head. I used the money to save a man," he said quietly. Tracy's lips pressed together, seeing the pain and courage in her son's eyes. "Kevin, my love, you have a heart of gold," she said softly, rocking Destiny. "Sometimes doing the right thing means sacrifice. Let's go to the hospital. We'll find a way." Kevin's heart swelled and sank at the same time, understanding that true courage often comes at a cost. In that moment, he knew he had done what his father would have done. And that knowledge, more than anything, carried him forward into the night. Kevin's legs burned as he sprinted up the cracked sidewalks, the cool evening air doing nothing to slow the pounding in his chest. Each step brought him closer to home, yet the sounds of wheezing behind closed doors pushed him faster. Destiny, his little sister, was struggling to breathe, each gasp a reminder of why he had been so careful with his money. The $15 he had earned that day had been destined for her medicine, and now, after spending it to save a man's life, he felt the crushing weight of consequence. As he reached the 3rd floor of their aging apartment building, he burst through the door to find Tracy, his mother, cradling Destiny in her lap, rocking her desperately, her own exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "Where's the medicine, Kevin?" Tracy's voice trembled, not in anger, but in fear, the red rims around her eyes revealing the hours she had spent working double shifts at the hospital, doing everything she could to provide for her children. Kevin swallowed hard. I used the money," he admitted, his voice low. "I had to save a man. He was dying." Tracy's hands paused mid-rock, her eyes searching his, torn between frustration and understanding. "You did what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over Destiny's strained breaths. Without wasting another moment, Tracy grabbed her coat and hurried with Kevin and Destiny to the hospital, hoping they could find a way to get a free dose of the life-saving asthma medicine. Inside the sterile, buzzing corridors, Tracy approached the head nurse, Sandra, a woman in her 50s with a carefully maintained air of authority. "Please," Tracy began, desperation threading her voice. "Just 1 dose for my daughter until we can get the rest. She's struggling to breathe." Sandra's lips pressed into a thin line, and her eyes flicked to Kevin, then back to Tracy, with barely concealed disapproval. "I can't just hand out free medication," she said sharply. "This isn't a charity center. Your family needs to learn responsibility." Kevin felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise in his chest, and his small hands curled into fists at his sides. Destiny's tiny body trembled as she gasped for air, and suddenly the injustice of the world pressed down on him like a physical weight. Before the situation could escalate, Dr. Mitchell, a black doctor passing by, noticed the tension and stepped forward. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone firm but calm. Kevin quickly explained the events of the afternoon, the man in the parking lot, the heart attack, and the $15 he had risked to save a life. Dr. Mitchell listened silently, eyes narrowing at Sandra's dismissive expressions. Without a word, he examined Destiny and administered a free dose of the bronchodilator. "It's taken care of," he said, his voice gentle, ignoring Sandra's huff of disapproval. Kevin watched as his sister's chest slowly eased and her wheezing softened. Relief washed over him, though mingled with a bitter frustration at how harshly they had been judged. Walking home later that night, Kevin felt the weight of everything that had happened. The small victories felt hollow against the backdrop of societal judgment and the constant reminder that being black in Detroit meant that every act of kindness, every decision, could be misread or condemned. As he trudged through the streets, his thoughts wandered to his father, Marcus Washington, a man he had believed abandoned them, but whose legacy of courage was woven into every fiber of his being. Tracy, noticing his contemplative silence, told him the truth. Marcus had died saving lives, diving into a river to rescue children from a sinking car. Kevin stopped in his tracks, the revelation settling deep in his chest. His father had been a hero, someone who never hesitated to act when someone's life was on the line. And in that moment, Kevin realized the unmistakable truth. He had inherited that same courage and selflessness. The night deepened, and the city's hum settled into a quiet rhythm, but far away, Razor, the man Kevin had saved, whispered urgently to a friend, Cole. "Find his family. Make sure they know what's coming," Razor said, his voice husky with gratitude and determination. Kevin and Tracy, exhausted and emotionally drained, returned to their small apartment, unaware that this simple act of kindness had already set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Sitting on the worn sofa, Kevin stared at Destiny, her tiny chest rising evenly now, and felt a flicker of hope. The world could be cruel, judgmental, and unfair, but there were moments when courage, compassion, and action could create ripples that no one could predict. Kevin knew that he had done the right thing, even if it had come at a personal cost. The weight of guilt for using the last money meant for Destiny's medicine was heavy, but he also understood that sometimes life demanded choices that were bigger than fear or judgment. That night, lying awake beside his sister, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace, thinking of the man he had saved, of his father's legacy, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. Somewhere in the quiet of the city, Razor's gratitude was already moving toward them, setting the stage for a future that promised hope, recognition, and perhaps a measure of justice that Kevin could never have imagined in his wildest dreams. Kevin awoke before dawn, the first light of morning creeping through the thin curtains, painting the worn walls of their small apartment in soft gold. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at Destiny, still sleeping peacefully after her inhaler, and then at Tracy, who sipped her watery coffee quietly at the table. The events of the previous day ran through his mind like a whirlwind, saving Razor, the ambulance, the hospital humiliation, Dr. Mitchell's intervention, and the revelation about his father. Just as he began to wonder whether the world could ever repay courage and compassion, a distant, powerful roar shook the quiet streets outside. Engines, hundreds of them. Kevin froze, heart racing. Tracy's eyes widened and she ran to the window. What is that?" she whispered, clutching Kevin's shoulder. Kevin's gaze followed hers and saw motorcycles lining the street, black vests glinting in the early morning sun. 10, 20, 50, no, nearly 100 Hell's Angels parking meticulously in front of their building. Neighbors peeked from windows, some calling the police, others staring in disbelief. Cole, the man Razor had entrusted with a message the night before, stepped off one of the motorcycles, moving with an unexpected calm. Unlike the others, he wore simple jeans and a t-shirt, nothing like the intimidating biker image. He raised a hand in greeting. "Mrs. Washington, Kevin," he said politely, knocking gently on the door. Tracy smoothed her simple dress and whispered to Kevin, "Be polite but careful. We don't know what they want." Inside, Cole explained what Kevin could not have anticipated. Razor, whose real name was Robert Martinez, was far more than a tattooed biker. He was a 52-year-old multi-millionaire, a philanthropist who had built 3 construction companies and employed hundreds of people. He had been on the brink of death 15 years ago, lost in addiction, until a young paramedic, Marcus Washington, Kevin's father, had risked his life to save him. The memory of that rescue had changed Razor forever. He had vowed to honor the man who had given him a second chance, dedicating his life to helping others, particularly disadvantaged communities. Kevin and Tracy listened in awe, realizing the extraordinary legacy their family carried forward through his selflessness. As Cole spoke, other bikers entered the apartment carrying large boxes. They brought new clothes for Kevin and Destiny, a year's supply of asthma medication, and enough financial support to cover rent, utilities, and groceries. The room seemed to grow brighter with each gesture, the weight of yesterday's despair lifting in the presence of gratitude and generosity. Razor himself entered slowly, still recovering from the previous day's heart attack, and embraced Kevin warmly. Tears filled the biker's eyes as he looked at the boy who had risked everything to save a stranger. "Kevin Washington," he said, voice thick, You remind me so much of Marcus. You have his heart. You've shown courage beyond your years. Today, it's our turn to give back." But their mission extended beyond gifts and gratitude. Cole explained that Razor had been informed of the injustice Kevin and his family had suffered at the hospital. Nurse Sandra, who had refused medicine to Destiny and humiliated Tracy and Kevin, had crossed a line that demanded accountability. The plan was not violent, far from it, but powerful in its ability to educate and expose prejudice. Razor intended to reveal Sandra's behavior publicly, showing the truth of her actions and the disparity between her life of privilege and the suffering she dismissed. Kevin felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation, realizing that justice did not always require confrontation. It could come through knowledge and awareness, through exposing truth with integrity. The bikers began preparing the nonviolent intervention, organizing carefully to enter the hospital later that day. Kevin and Tracy, guided by Cole, participated in planning the message: to educate, not to punish; to illuminate, not to intimidate. They practiced the words, the approach, the calm but firm tone that would leave no room for denial or evasion. Kevin felt empowered, recognizing that the courage he had summoned in the pharmacy parking lot was now being amplified, creating a ripple that could touch lives beyond their small apartment and their immediate struggle. As the morning unfolded, Kevin watched the Hells Angels move with purpose, carrying boxes, coordinating movements, and speaking to neighbors. The roar of motorcycles, once intimidating, now felt like a herald of hope. Tracy hugged her son tightly. "Do you see, Kevin? One small act, your act, has set all of this in motion. This is how kindness spreads." Kevin nodded, a mixture of humility and pride swelling in his chest. For the first time, he truly understood the magnitude of choice, the power of courage, and how one moment of selflessness could ripple outward, touching not only the life of a man in need, but the lives of countless others. In that early morning, the family realized that their world, once confined by fear and scarcity, had expanded infinitely through gratitude, redemption, and the uncompromising pursuit of justice. The streets of Detroit, once echoing with hardship and struggle, began to hum with a different energy as Kevin Washington stepped into a new role far beyond his years. At just 14, he had been thrust into extraordinary circumstances, saving a life, facing societal judgment, and witnessing the ripple effects of courage and kindness. But it was in the weeks and months that followed that Kevin truly discovered the transformative power of his actions. With Razor's guidance and the resources of the Hells Angels mentoring program, Kevin began to reach out to the youth in his neighborhood, connecting inner-city teenagers with lessons in mechanics, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Each day, 12 eager teenagers gathered in a modest garage transformed into a classroom of practical skills, learning to fix engines, manage projects, and lead with integrity. Kevin's voice, firm yet encouraging, carried the weight of experience beyond his years, reminding them that courage and responsibility were more valuable than money or status. Soon, the vision grew larger. A vacant lot in the heart of Detroit became the site for the Marcus Washington Community Center, named in honor of Kevin's father. It was to be a beacon of hope, a vocational training hub, a free medical clinic, and a safe space where mentorship could flourish. Kevin, still only 15, took on the role of leading the youth programs, mentoring the very kids who might have been left behind without opportunity. He taught not only technical skills, but also the importance of ethics, compassion, and standing up for what was right. The community watched in awe as a boy, younger than most leaders they knew, guided the growth of an initiative that had the power to reshape lives. The Marcus Washington Community Center quickly became more than a building. It became a symbol of what one act of selflessness could ignite, a single $15 decision in a pharmacy parking lot, transforming an entire neighborhood. Redemption also found its way into this story. Sandra, the nurse who had once humiliated Kevin and his mother, found herself at the center, volunteering as part of the free clinic. Humble in her approach, she worked tirelessly, tending to patients she had previously judged, listening and learning with genuine humility. Over months, her transformation became visible to all. She had lost her previous job and status, Yet the experience humbled her, teaching her lessons in empathy and equality that no classroom could have offered. Kevin observed quietly, offering guidance and forgiveness without patronizing, showing that second chances, when embraced sincerely, could heal even those who had caused harm. The center became a living classroom not only for youth, but also for adults seeking to redefine themselves, creating a ripple of social responsibility across the community. As Kevin continued to lead programs and mentor, his story spread far beyond Detroit. At 16, he was invited to the Masonic Theater to receive the National Young Hero Award from the Governor of Michigan. The auditorium was filled with over 1,000 people, students, parents, city officials, and representatives from the Hells Angels community. Tracy and Destiny sat proudly in the front row, Destiny now breathing freely without fear, a living reminder of Kevin's courage. Razor and Cole offered a standing ovation as Kevin took the stage, recounting his father's heroism and the day he had made a choice to help a stranger with the last $15 in his pocket. "Heroes aren't born in mansions," Kevin told the audience, his voice steady. "They grow up in small apartments with big hearts. Courage, compassion, and the willingness to act, these are what create change." The crowd erupted in applause, recognizing that true heroism was not about accolades, but about the enduring impact one life could have on countless others. The Marcus Washington Community Center soon expanded to 5 cities, serving over 2,000 families, providing mentorship, education, and community support. Kevin's leadership inspired other youth to see beyond their immediate struggles, to understand that even small acts of kindness could set off chains of positive change. Sandra, now the clinic coordinator, had devoted 60 hours a week tending to families with a renewed sense of purpose. Watching her care for children who reminded her of Kevin and Destiny, she often reflected on her own transformation, understanding that empathy and redemption were the true markers of humanity. Kevin's story had touched countless lives, proving that when individuals act with integrity and courage, societal prejudices can be challenged and communities can be uplifted. Years later, standing at the grave of Marcus Washington, Kevin reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion. He understood now that true strength was not measured by the ability to defeat enemies, but by the capacity to transform them into allies, to turn cruelty into opportunity, and to bridge divides that had seemed insurmountable. His father had taught him that a life was worth any sacrifice. Razor had shown the power of gratitude and redemption, and Kevin had learned that the smallest choices, guided by kindness, could redefine what victory meant. As the sun set over Detroit, painting the skyline in soft amber, Kevin realized that his legacy, and the legacy of every life touched by courage and compassion, was only beginning. Because when kindness leads the way, the possibilities for change are limitless, and communities, once divided by fear and prejudice, can rise together.